Hey, I'm Luke and welcome to my channel. Today we are working on this beastie, the Macintosh Color Classic 2. This is the one that I previously just unpacked and did a bit of testing on, where I've actually had it shipped over from Japan because these were never released in Australia. So this is at the moment an empty chassis. There's no analog board and no logic board in it. The logic board is currently sitting behind me right here. Well, there it is. And it's in a normal Color Classic chassis, and it's actually running pretty well. Hasn't been recapped yet, had no major signs of leakage, and everything seems to work sound. Everything works pretty well on it. So I've just been doing some running testing on that. I will recap the logic board though, because it's probably going to leak, or if it hasn't already, it's just best to do it. So that is a future video, not what we're working on today. Today I am focused on the analog board. Here it is here on the bench. As you can see, I've already taken it out of the case. I've moved all the cables out of the way and just clipped them up there so they're out of the way. And I've actually already done some decapping, mostly of the caps in this area here. Now, the reason why I did this, I opened the case up to have a look inside it. This was really dirty. Like this, I think this Color Classic has seen some serious amount of use over the years. So it was pretty dirty, and also there were major signs of leaking, particularly around this area. This was all sort of had a very sticky residue around it. I'll insert some pictures over the top of this now so you can see exactly what I saw when I opened it up. And basically I flipped it over, looked underneath, ran a cotton swab over the top of it. The electrolyte basically on the underside of the board was wet and was starting to degrade the UV mask on the underside of the board. So basically I went into emergency reaction mode and effectively got the soldering iron warmed up and ripped these caps off here. These were the ones that were the most sort of leaking, these two here and this one here. Everything else didn't really show signs of leaking. Here are all the leaky old caps that I pulled off. As you can see, I've got all of the new caps already lined up over here, ready to go in. What I am going to do though is I'm just going to rip off a couple of other extra ones that I haven't done yet. Not normally recommended. I normally follow Bruce from Brankus Creations capping guides. I'll put a link to that in the description for this particular board. So all the ones I've ripped off there are the ones that he would normally recommend. I have the replacements for some of these other bigger ones there, and just because they're reasonably large caps, I'm going to take them off as well, just because I've got the replacements and may as well do them while I'm working on this. What I was seeing with this board when I tested it in the first video was essentially you hit the soft power on the keyboard and the keyboard lights flashed on off, and you heard a bit of a noise come out of the chassis, and there was a bit of a weird smell. That smell could have been the sort of fishy cap smell as well, but it didn't power it up and didn't spin the fan up properly. So I immediately stopped using this board because it was obviously not reliable. I didn't want to damage the logic board. So I'd say obviously these caps are pretty much very important for the DC side of this analog board. So hence why we were seeing the problems we were seeing. Interesting enough, this has been tested a few times. So it's actually got, so it's obviously had some work done on it over the years. It was tested on the 20th of January 1996, which would have been about 3 years after it was manufactured. And there's another one here, tested on the 5th of the 8th, 1994. So that's literally, I think this was in September or something like that, 1993. So this is less than 1 year someone had work done on this, or it was tested. Or maybe this was just whoever owned them, literally their testing process was to take the boards out and do electrical tests and stick them on there as part of keeping them in an office or something, who knows. Kind of like that test and tag stuff that we do nowadays. But yeah, so there we go. So this is what we've got at the moment. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to show you the caps. If I switch to the microscope. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a 1000 UF 16 volt capacitor. This was the main offender, as you can see. It's actually started to pop out from the bottom. This is the one that I believe dropped most of its stuff over the board and did the bulk of the damage. Now if I put this in here, let's just I'm just going to hook this up to my capacitor tester. That, and let's run a test on it. Unknown part. Not surprising. I'm just going to do it again. I did do a few of these tests the other day, and at one stage it actually gave me the right reading, and then it stopped, and then it started giving me just random, completely wrong readings. So the capacitor might still work slightly, but not much. Unknown. No, this capacitor, I'm just going to just try making sure I've got a good connection on this. No. Obviously, whatever I tested, I got out of it the other day, that was its last breath of life. So that is our main offender. These two here that are stuck together, these are the 3300 16 volt ones. I believe one of these was showing signs of leaking on the board as well. So let's just quickly test both of these. All right, 3298. So that's not too bad for a 3300. Yeah, if it's about on, bang on. Let's just test the other one. 3319. So yeah, both them test okay-ish. Interesting enough, that first one, the ESR was a lot higher than this one's ESR, and normally these capacitors should have a pretty low ESR being in a switching power supply. So anyway, all those capacitors can just go away. As you can see, I've cleaned up much of this board, but there's obviously still gunk in areas where I haven't actually pulled the caps out. This is the area where this one here, this CP41, that was our main offender. And this one here definitely had some signs of leakage as well. And as you can see, she's a bit grotty there, but otherwise, very dirty there. Otherwise okay. If I just flip the board over, because I just want to inspect just along this edge. I was looking at this before. Focus. Yeah, so where are we? This is the main capacitor that was leaking. So I just wanted to check these traces here, because these seem to be where all the electrolyte was sort of sitting. And as I said, it was starting to pull off. I've actually, probably once I've worked on this and cleaned it up and put new ones on there and done some testing, I may actually put some extra UV mask along this. Actually, even that, probably just scratch that away a little bit, because I think it's started to corrode around. You can kind of see around the edges here. This is where it was all very wet, and it had actually started to effectively corrode. So the reality of this, I'd actually probably suggest, because when I bought this, it was shown with the pictures of it working. It didn't work when I first plugged it in. My guess is that the person who owned it previously over in Japan had it in a cupboard for years, hasn't been turned on, pulled it out to think, oh, I'm going to sell it. So they turned it on, and it worked. And they took their pictures and they listed it, and I bought it, and over it comes. And in the space of that, several months, weeks, who knows, happened. And I'd probably suggest that is when that capacitor decided to drop its contents. I've seen in other, I don't have exact proof of this theory that I've got, but I've seen it with other, particularly analog boards and these type of axial type capacitors. That essentially they can be fine. They can just sit there, be quite happy, and then you turn it on, you use the computer, it's all fine. Then you put it on the shelf, and that's just generally that, like, suddenly using them again after 20, 30 years, suddenly just causes them to, whatever corrosion's going on them, to just accelerate, and then they drop their contents. So I'd probably suggest that's what had happened. So that's why it worked in the testing when they listed it. But over the course of the preceding couple of weeks, it then decided to empty its contents. So yeah, I'm not too worried about this at the moment. This all seems to look okay, but I will definitely do some touching up there, I think, once we've actually done the work on this. So what I'm just going to do now is, like I said, there's a couple of extra caps I want to get out. I don't know whether I can get it underneath here. Yeah. These two here. Well, actually this one. Focus. There we go. That one there is a big one. There's another two here. This bent over one here. While I'm working on it, I'm going to grab him out. I've got a replacement for him. And this big 250 volt one sitting there, I've got a replacement for that one as well. So I'll get them out. I've already got that one out because that one's in Bruce's guide. So yeah, that's what we'll do now. I'll do a bit of a montage. Okay, so I'm all set up. I've got my exhaust fan, soldering irons over here, ready to go. And so I'm just going to take out these two here, this one, and this one. Let's go from there. Okay, so now I've ripped out those capacitors. None of those looked problematic. They all looked probably fine. So probably overkill to rip them out, but I'm just erring on the better safe than sorry. So those ones there will all be replaced by this little bunch up here, which are all nice. Most of them are Nichicon, I think, or at least actually no, Panasonic. I got these ones all to be, and low ESR capacitors. So we'll take all those ones out and put them over there with the rest of the old ones. So yes, there we go. They're out. Next step is now to start the process of putting the new caps in. So cue that montage. Okay, so I have now recapped all of the capacitors that I want to do today at least, and I've just gone through and double checked to make sure I got the polarity right on all of them, just to be absolutely sure. So now what we'll do is we'll give it a test. I've got to put now, the only problem with these boards obviously is you've got to put them back in the chassis fully, and it's a bit of a pain in the bum. Oops. Actually, oh no, that's right, that wire goes out there. Yes, let's see, speaker cable. Push those down there to lock that in place. That's put on much easier than I was expecting. I've just cut some new tape to just run this speaker cable along here. Interesting enough, that's how it was done in the factory, with tape like that, so it's good for them. I've just used electrical tape. I probably could have used some capped on tape, but electrical tape will do the job for the moment. Oops, that wasn't quite on. There we go, just push that back in there. That side wasn't attached properly. All right, that's back in there. Now let me get the chassis. Okay, here's our chassis. Pretty dirty, and in fact, if this works, regardless of whether it works, I'm probably going to dismantle this completely and actually try retrObriting the case. So the whole thing's going to get a good clean soon anyway. But yeah, this is pretty grotty. Didn't have a hard drive in it, so there's an empty hard drive bay there. Let me just flick the camera over to my other side. There we go, that's a better view. Didn't have a hard drive bay, sorry, didn't have a hard drive. What I have done though, I have attached a bit of an extension cable with the Molex there, because I want to use these to test the voltage if this works. So, move this thing out of the way and pop this beastie back in. There we go, and give it a bit of a firm push. And then we'll just attach everything. It's a degas cable. I probably don't really need to attach this, but why not, just for the sake of completion. This is our microphone cable, goes up there. This one, okay, actually I need to remove the cable tie that I put in here just to keep these cables out of the way. All right. Why is this being so difficult? There we go. That goes in there like that. Nice and on. All right. I'd normally put some fresh electrolytic grease on that, but given I'm going to be pulling this apart again, if this works, regardless, I am not going to bother it for the moment. Just gently attach that. This one's very important. It's our ground. You don't have to forget that and leave that touching something, and it will short things out. So important to get that out of the way, because I don't want to blow it up, ideally. Okay, that is that plugged in. Now to test this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a couple of these alligator clips. I'm just going to attach them to here. Now that's where, this point here is where the fan has contacts that touches. So basically, that's the fan from the back of the case. It normally sits this way, so it blows out that way. Ugh, yuck. And it has these contacts down here that basically make contact with these two little points here. So essentially, if I put these alligator clips on here, and red is our red, and then just attach them to these metal connection points here, like that, we'll be able to see if the fan spins. So Let's put him there. Because ideally I want to have a little bit of voltage pull on this. Basically, one of the maybe somewhat handy things about these Color Classic chassis is that they will power up if there's no logic board in them. So that's what I'm going to do to test it, because I don't want to damage it. But I am going to attach a hard drive, just random, I think it's a random iMac hard drive actually. Just going to put that there, just because I want to see whether it can spin that up. And then also for our voltage testing completeness, let's plug in the multimeter. Yep, that works. Put that on voltage. Find my other spare cable that I've got here and stick that in there. So let's do this in the 5-volt side of it. And that will tell us whether we've got any voltage. All right. The power cable is off, so I'm just going to plug that in now. That. What else? Double check everything. Plugged in, that's plugged in, this is plugged in, that's attached, that's plugged in, that's plugged in. Everything looks like it could work. So I think it's time to give this a test and see whether we get any sparks. So we'll turn the power onto that first. And then I'm just going to move myself out of the way a bit. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've definitely got voltage and the fan is spinning. Now I've got a funny feeling that this is pretty common when you don't have the logic board in them. So that sort of pulsating voltage is what I have found in these before. I did hear the high voltage kick in on the CRT as well, so definitely don't want to touch any of this now that I've done that. Didn't hear the hard drive kick in, but that's maybe there wasn't quite enough of the 12 volts there to give that going, but it definitely spun the fan. So I think with that, I need to actually now put a logic board in it and see whether it powers up. All right, I've just done a bit of a reorg here. Now I have put a Color Classic logic board in it for the moment. I went to use my test board, but I then realized I had borrowed a chip off it, so it wasn't going to be able to boot it. The CUDA chip was missing, so I can't use that. So this is a known good working logic board, which I'm hoping it continues to be known good working after this little exercise. And the only other thing I've just changed, I realized also I didn't plug in the speaker, so I've now plugged that in correctly. So that's installed, the fan's hooked up, hard drive is still attached and plugged in, as is my multimeter. So we'll just give that power. And now when we turn the voltage on the power point, nothing should happen. Oh, interesting enough, there is a little bit of voltage there. And then we'll give it power. And it flicked on and off and then went straight off again. So I don't know if it fixed this at all. That's the same fault that it had before. Yeah, it's flipping. It's making like a flip, 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 flip noise. Well, that's disappointing, isn't it? Not gonna lie, I find some of these Color Classic analog boards pain in the asses to work on. And I don't know whether the flip, flip, flip sound is actually coming from the speaker or not. I'm just going to do it again. It actually sounds like it's coming from somewhere else. I'm just going to unplug that speaker just to make sure of that. Turn this off. Turn this back on. Okay, I've just unplugged the speaker because I just want to make sure that flipping sound is not coming from the speaker. And it definitely is. because it no longer makes it. So essentially, this is what we've got now. If you watch that keyboard when I push this, you can see it tries to start up. You get a bit of flash of lights. You saw some voltage kick in there, and then it collapses again. So that, unfortunately, is the exact same fault that it was having before. Maybe somewhat more stably. No, I don't know. So that recapping hasn't necessarily fixed the underlying problem that we've got. So I'm going to have to do some more investigations on this now, I think. So, okay, I'm just going to interrupt that wrap up of the video that I was just about to do there, because the Mac Color Classic 2 is now working. It's actually been a couple of weeks since that last section that I was just doing just then, and a couple of things have changed. The first one you'll notice, obviously, is the Mac no longer looks as yellowed as it did previously. So I did a retrObrite session on it. I've actually just dropped a YouTube short video showing that whole process of me retrObriting it and cleaning it up. And as you can see, it came out really well. It basically looks original. Like in comparison to this keyboard, the keyboard is now more yellow than the Color Classic itself. Check out that YouTube video, the YouTube short video, because it is really good, and I'll show you all around it. So not talking about the color, but talking now about the fact that it's actually working. So obviously in that, where I got up to, I'd replaced those capacitors and it still wasn't working. Similar, seeing the same fault that we were having previously. Well, you can see now it boots. It's running the After Dark screensaver. It's stable. I have run this now for several days, basically. So I think what we'll just quickly do is show you what I did to actually fix this, and the little bit extra that I needed to do to actually make the Color Classics analog board work. So let's open this up on the bench, because I actually want to also just put in a BlueSCSI permanently inside it, and reinstall the floppy drive, which I've just recently serviced as well. So they're not in it at the moment, so I want to put those in it. So I may as well open it up, and I will show you how I fixed that analog board. Okay, the Color Classic analog board is back out on the bench, and as you will remember, I replaced the main capacitors, these bigger ones on the board, particularly these ones over here, which were the leaky ones. I based that off Bruce's Recap a Mac guide, which I have conveniently printed out here. Now, they were all the ones in these big square boxes, plus I did a few of the extra bigger ones over here. Doing some research afterwards on the Tinker Different forum and other places, basically people were just sort of saying you should just replace all of the capacitors on these boards, because they just are notorious for being unreliable. So, heeding that advice, I basically decided to focus my attention on the ones that I had access to. I basically went through using this this map that I printed out here, highlighted all the different types, because there's a lot on this board. There's a lot of extra capacitors. A lot of 1UF 50 volts, which are all these yellow ones, as well as the 100 UF 25 volts. Now, they're the ones I had in stock here that I could easily do. All of these orange ones are weird ratings on them. So like 2.2 UF, 100 volts, 2.2, 200 volts. These ones in green circled here are 4.7, 50 volts. So there's a lot of random other ones there. So I decided, really, given it was a voltage problem that I was sort of seeing and not getting enough voltage in the board, that I was going to focus my attention on this extra section here. One extra thing that I did actually work out with this board after you would have last seen it, you would have seen it cycling the power, like sort of going flip, flip, flip like that. What I found is if I loaded the analog board up, so I actually plugged in 2 hard drives to it, it actually would start up. So it was actually powering up, but the voltage was really low, not high enough for it actually to boot the machine. So definitely voltage problems was where I was sort of thinking my problems was. So what I did is I had these 1UF 50 volts and the 100 UF 25 volts in stock. So basically I ripped all of these ones off on this section of the board. I didn't do that one there. I sort of decided that one's obviously related to the actual display side of the board. So I kind of avoided these ones for the moment. And obviously these pink ones I didn't have and I had to order them in. So what I've done here as it stands today is I basically ripped up all these yellow ones and the 100 UF25s that were all floating around there and replaced those. That was the first thing I did. There's two other things I did. So essentially the fault could have been three things. Now, I actually think it probably was the capacitors, is my theory, because I had one of the, I think it was the 100 UF25 volts. When I tested it in my component tester, it actually was faulting a lot. Occasionally it would come through correctly and show the right sort of component, but most of the time it said it was an invalid component. So I felt like one of those was playing up. The other thing that I did do is I replaced the octocoupler, which is this chip here. So they're all my components that I've ripped off. And this is the octocoupler, if I can get that to focus there. Now that regulates the voltage on these boards. Notorious in the color, so no, not the color classic, the actual classic, the Macintosh classic, for these to be problematic and cause weird voltage issues on the board. So there's actually two of them. The main one in my research that you have to worry about is this one over here. So now that also was in the sort of damage zone area for the leaking capacitor here. So I basically ripped that off. I had some of those in stock that I'd bought ages ago. So basically the same component. You can buy them online pretty easily. I replaced that. When I was actually replacing that, it smelled really fishy, like the capacitor juice fishy smells. So I basically also then cleaned all that up and I took off this. Basically because I couldn't be sure that there wasn't capacitor stuff underneath it. So basically ripping that out, I cleaned all that up and then put it back on the board. And so they're the sort of the three things that I did, and it boots now. So essentially, I think it was either a combination really of one of these capacitors was faulty, or it was this octocoupler, which was on the way out. So I've got another one of these boards that is got a very similar type of fault where you can actually get it to boot if you load it very heavily with lots of, like, a couple of hard drives plugged in and stuff. So I'm actually going to test that theory on that board at some point as well and just see. So that's it. That's all I did, and now we're working. So I've still got a few more capacitors that I could do on this board, but I'm also not going to tempt fate, to be honest. I've now got these extra ones that I ordered in afterwards, so I could replace all of these pink ones as well as the ones over here on the sort of the video driver part of the circuit. But it's working really well. It's got a really stable voltage. It's a nice just under 5 volts when it's loaded up, and a nice solid 12 volts on the 12 volt rail. So I don't think I'm going to tempt the fate with that. And I'll just leave that as is. So now what I'm going to do is do a quick cut of me inserting the BlueSCSI that I have built, BlueSCSI 1, to go inside it, as well as I said, let's put this floppy drive back in because I've serviced that, cleaned it all out. It was full of gunk. But it now works perfectly. All right, so here we go. Let's put this back in. Okay, all back together. Oh, actually, no, I just realized I haven't put the speaker back in. That's not quite all back together. I wish I had have put that in before I pulled this back in, because they are now, it's going to be a pain. This is interesting, the way they did it. Much easier to put on when the analog board is not in the housing. Let's see if I angle it in there. There we go. Here we go. Not going to move anymore. All right, and plug the cable back in. One other thing I also did, you would have seen I installed the like a extension cable for the BlueSCSI, so that effectively I can change the image on the BlueSCSI without actually needing to pull that out, because as you saw, these are a pain in the ass to pull apart and get access to the hard drive and the floppy drive, because you basically got to remove the entire analog board to get into the trays section, which is up here. So essentially, whenever I am getting close to buttoning one of these up, I always put one of these in. You can just buy them on Amazon, I think, or AliExpress. And essentially, it just allows you to then mount it to the back of the machine. And then whenever you want to change the image, just swap it out. It's quite handy. All right. I've still got the these extension cables on the power Molex there. I'll probably take them out at some point soon. All right, now we're back to where we were. We're set to go. Turn the power on there. Give us some power there. Just one last check. Everything looks good. All right, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, power. Now, interestingly, no chime, but we are powering up. The high voltages has kicked in and the screen is coming to life. Yes, it is. And I have a mouse. Why is my speaker not working? Okay, so now I recorded the whole ending to this video, basically pulled the analog board back out again, the logic board out, reseated everything, still couldn't get sound to work, and effectively came to the conclusion that obviously something had gone wrong with the logic board. Like, I hadn't recapped it yet, so the next step was recap the logic board and hopefully that would fix the sound. But I haven't done that yet, and I have fixed the problem, because look, we're now chiming. Basically, what it turned out to be, after I'd finished everything, I was cleaning up stuff on my desk and I noticed, and this is not the logic board from that, this is actually a classic logic board, one of these little grounding lugs on the bottom was just sitting on my desk. And I thought, oh, well, that's odd. I don't know where that came from. Well, actually, I knew where it came from, but basically I was like, wonder where on the board it came from. So I then pulled it out again and had a look, and effectively on the colorclassic 2 logic board, the sound chip up in this corner up here, like it is on the colorclassic, there was a grounding lug missing. It had just fallen off, and I basically put that back on, installed it back into the Mac, and Bob's your uncle, it just worked. I probably should have gone and realized that before I did all of the stuffing around, because these Color Classics, and well, the Color Classics original, and I assume the Color Classics 2 are very susceptible to grounding problems and sound. So that's all it turned out to be. So I am really happy with that. It is now working, and as you can see, it just booted up fine. Okay, so let's recap what we've done in this video. We have basically repaired the analog board. Working perfectly now. Again, I've run this for several days now, and it is rock solid and giving really good voltages, so very happy about that. I've also serviced the floppy drive and fixed that up, and I have also put a BlueSCSI 1 into it, and it's booting off that now, and I haven't yet mounted the SD card on the back. It's just sitting there, but that is something I'll do when I properly tighten up and button it all up. The next step is basically the logic board. I do want to recap it. It hasn't been recapped, even though it seems to be working. One thing I have noticed is this weird sound coming from this. Out of the speaker, you can hear this sort of like buzzing-ish kind of noise, and it seems to be associated to what the computer's doing. It's a little bit of a whiny kind of noise coming out of the speaker. So I'm assuming that is probably just something to do with the capacitors, because I've seen that sometimes previously as well. So I think that's the next logical thing to do, recap it and get those capacitors off, because I think there was some sign of leakage, although it didn't look too bad. But I think we need to get it under the microscope and test it, or check it out, and replace the caps. So I think that's the next thing I'm going to do. But for now, that is going to end this video today. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you've learned something new about the Color Classic and its analog board. Some of these analog boards are very, very touchy, so you've got to be careful with them because they can just spontaneously stop working if you play with them around too much. So I'm really happy this one's working. And as I said, the other thing I have actually done as well is I've retrObrited the case. Again, check out that shorts video that I put on YouTube where I took this from the very yellowed case to what you see here today. I used the vapour method for the retrObriting for that. So that's it. I think we're done for the moment. Thanks again for watching. Hopefully you liked this video. Please leave me a like, and again, let me know any comments or feedback in the comments section of the video. I love hearing from you. And if you feel so inclined, please subscribe. Otherwise, thanks very much, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.